Yo, is my mic on? Let me see. All the mics are on. Great. What's cracking? What's popping? What's shaking, everybody? Happy Friday. This is episode 21 of the Comic Cinematic Universe. And what's up, Grace? What's popping?
What is up, Chill? I'm doing great. Enjoying this warm weather we're having. I'm like sunburnt, but it's all right.
I'm about to
We're
say,
here.
are you? Because I'm not. Like, say, I know it's kind of technically still wintertime, but like, say, sometimes I have these sessions early in the morning, right? And I come dressed in a hoodie, and sometimes these sessions are outside. And I'm expecting it to be much colder than what it is, and just so happened to be like 80 degrees like one morning. So,
Yes. No, the thing is, like, I leave early, so I'm cold all day
yeah,
until I finally step out again, and I'm like, ugh. Like I'm in already my thick layer, and I'm just like taking my clothes off as I'm running to the car because
right.
it's just like, yeah, it's a lot. I hope you guys are doing well with this warmer weather.
Yeah, yeah, definitely for sure. So, as far as the topic that we got going today, we are going to be discussing episode, no, not episode, well, episodes 4 through 6, but this is part two of our Falcon and the Winter Soldier recap. And, yeah, like I finished episodes or rewatched episodes 4 through 6 this week. So, I'm ready to get into it. You ready?
Let's do it. I'm
Awesome.
ready.
All right, so let me just go ahead and do the change of the screen. Boom. And here we are. So, episode 4. Hold on. Totally unprepared. Let me pull up my notes real
Unacceptable.
quick. You know what? You go ahead. Jump us off on episode 4.
I will. So this episode four, and opened up with a flashback to Wakanda. So Bucky's time
Mm-hmm.
between Civil War and Infinity War, right? It said, I think it says like 6 years, right, ago from the events of
Right.
the show.
Right.
And this scene, I kind of spoke very, very briefly on last week because it's one of my favorite scenes of the entire series, just because Bucky, I think, is a very loved character
Mm-hmm.
in like
He
the
is.
MCU fandom, right?
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
we are very like fiercely protective of him because he's been through a lot, and a lot of that has been displayed and talked about on this season of Falcon the Winter Soldier.
Right.
And so to see this, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think Sebastian Stan did such an amazing job at just emoting all the different things that Bucky is experiencing, right? So we have, I think I wrote down her name,
Mm-hmm.
Oye, one of the Dora Milaje, who is saying the words that would typically activate the Winter
Wait.
Soldier,
Wait. Wait.
right?
Wait. 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 Because we talked about this last episode as far as her name. And watching these episodes
Oye,
is
Oye.
Io.
Ah, yo, you know something? Hold on. You know what I did?
Mm-hmm.
If anything, I think I entered and it spelled incorrectly, and I'm like, okay, I'm
Uh
just gonna roll with what's on my notes. But
yeah.
thank you for
Mm-hmm.
correcting me.
Mm-hmm.
I love how you. What are you eating?
An
What are
orange.
you eating?
An
Enjoy,
orange. I'm
enjoy.
sorry.
Shamelessly,
Right.
man. Um, no, but she's saying like the old words, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're kind of quoting Baron Zemo here, and you can see just almost like the expectation that Bucky has that this just isn't going to work. So I
Right.
think with the years and years of being the Winter Soldier and just, I guess, feeling the hopelessness of this prison he's kind of put in,
Right.
I don't think Bucky really felt like it was going to work, you know?
Right.
Um, and as she finishes the words, you see that like sudden relief on his face, and he's just in tears.
Mm-hmm.
And we hear her, I think she says, like, you are now free, and just such a beautiful scene.
Yeah. 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 Like
Such a great opening.
say with Bucky being in Wakanda, right? Because that's where we end off uh in Civil War, and this scene happens between Civil War and Infinity War. So
Mm-hmm.
he's in there getting the treatment. I didn't know how he was gonna get the treatment when they kind of put him on like a deep freeze or in Civil War. But it came to the point to where this scene I feel was necessary just to show how they were able to kind of heal him. They didn't go
Mm-hmm.
through every necessary step that they took to bring him back. But it's like here they established that, man, the Wakandas can do anything. You know what I'm
Seriously, like,
saying?
and it's established that I think it's later in the episode, like, when, or maybe it was in the previous episode where Bucky is just expressing his gratitude, for say it, Io. I don't
Correct.
have it written
Mm-hmm.
down.
Yep.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
Io and Shuri. So we know that Shuri was heavily involved in just his recovery,
Yeah.
and during that scene, as we see just the almost like expectancy of him shifting into the Winter Soldier is happening. She's saying the words. We're getting all of those flashback scenes that that we've seen in the
Mm-hmm.
past during, like, the MCU of Bucky being the Winter Soldier, like heavy PTSD.
Right.
And I couldn't help but think of the scene in Civil War where he's in the room with the fake psychiatrist who is
Zemo.
Zemo,
Mm-hmm.
right? And he starts to say the words, and I think he's just emoting a similar thing. So although we don't see it in Civil War, we can imagine that a similar process is happening kind of intrinsically, where he's having these flashback sequences.
Yeah.
So it's real. So my favorite, like, intro in an episode, like, so good.
Well, I think with that and in this series, I feel like this may be my favorite episode out of all six. This may be my favorite episode. Just because it was, I say it was Wakanda heavy. We're gonna get into it a little later. Oh, wait, no.
Just
Was
around the corner. The next scene is
this episode to where what the Wakandas approached them? This episode?
yes. So after this, like, flashback scene that we get, we go back to, I believe, Bucky and
Oh, I got you.
yeah,
All right, all
yeah.
right, all right. Because I'm looking at my notes and I was like, wait, where do they come in? All right. So say after this scene, yes. This is where it kind of goes into the present, and um, John Walker, his partner, kind of meet up with Falcon and the Winter Soldier trying to take out Carly. So they get her location, and from here, Sam is doing what he did before he even met Captain America. Before he even met Steve Rogers. Like, this was his thing as far as working with soldiers and working on their, let's say, PTSD and anything that happened while they were on duty. So this is
Hmm.
like his field of expertise. He's not only just a Falcon, but he works with people who deals with trauma. Now, Carly being one of those people and understanding the trauma of being what's the phrase you said? Did you say displaced?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
he has a better understanding of kind of how to handle the situation, and uh enter John Walker, and we already kind of get a feel from the previous episodes that, say, when we first meet him, he was a little cooler, as far as his mental space,
Hmm.
but from the lack of respect that's being shown towards him, you can see that it's starting to eat at him, and he wants that respect, and he's almost kind of forcing that. And with Bucky and Sam, they're just like, let's cool off. Let me talk
Yeah.
to her and all that. And this is where, again, you kind of get that breakdown to where John is not in control and he has no idea what to do.
And I think it's like and you're right, like, we've seen this kind of build progressively through the series or the season. You see John start to crumble,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, like losing his cool under the weight of the shield,
Mm-hmm.
And like I said in our last episode of this, like, I don't like John Walker's character in terms of, like, we're meant not to like him.
Right.
We're meant not to like
Right.
him. And the actor
Mm-hmm.
that portrays him does an amazing job, right? But I think what this series overall kind of displays is that there's no black and white to these kind of issues, to these characters.
Right.
There's such a complexity to them, and definitely John Walker falls into that, right? Because we get a lot of scenes that are meant to kind of elicit a lot of empathy.
Mm-hmm.
I think this episode, really in general, is where we see the huge crash
Yeah.
of John Walker as Captain America, and he's really at his wits' end, before he even interacts with the Dora Milaje because that's a little more like down the scene
Mm-hmm.
or down in this episode. He is already getting so frustrated because he's expecting people to kind of give him that same respect and
Mm-hmm.
adoration that was given to Steve Rogers as Captain America, and he's like just frustrated with why people don't see him in that same place.
Right.
And something that's going to become very important as this episode continues is Lamar is kind of that figure to reel him back, to kind of keep him somewhat cool and just give him a little bit more perspective. He's grounding John, you know?
But I can counter that just for the fact that yes, he's there as his right hand man, and he is kind of grounding him, in a sense. But at the same time, we will get to how Walker finds a vial of the super soldier serum, but without Lamar knowing, he encourages the idea of soldiers having the super soldier serum, so
Mhm.
even though we see him as more so kind of like an uplifting person to John when John is down, who's to say if he were to have the serum that he may be just the same as John, like
Yeah.
um we've already established that, or not it only we, just the MCU has established that Steve Rogers is a one of a kind, right? In terms of who he is and how he reacted to the serum, and residually there wasn't really any negative effect. He was just like good beyond measure, But
And just to, oh, go ahead,
yeah, no,
continue.
go ahead.
Sorry,
What are
I
you saying?
missed that. I was just gonna say, and to add to that, I mean, like, he's worthy enough to carry Mjolnir. You know what I mean?
Right,
Like, done. Like,
right.
that's enough just to display how rare he is.
Mm-hmm.
And to get back to like just the part of like the empathy, like I think I have for John, the more I kind of look into other perspectives into that character, like he was really kind of set up to fail. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how do you fit the shoes of someone who is that amazing? You know what I mean? And I think him going into it, like they both of them, like Lamar and him, were pretty cocky about what their roles were. And by no means would I say like Lamar was going to be a better fit to take on like the serum or anything like that. But I think he plays the role of trying to keep like John Walker calm. Yeah, I definitely would agree. He kind of pushes John to take the serum because when he asks him in this episode, like, oh, like, would you take the serum if you had the opportunity? He's like, hell yeah, like
Right,
no hesitation. But the reason I highlighted that is because obviously in this episode, Lamar gets killed, and that, I mean, he John was already unstable, like
right.
he was already really
He was
feeling
on
the
the
weight.
edge. Yep. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and then being that at that point he already took the serum, Lamar's death just derails him completely.
Yeah.
Obviously he lost his best friend, and his best friend's not there to help reel him back either, right? So I think it's just significant to point that out because it's going to mean a lot to what John kind of does later on in the episode. But I don't want to get too ahead. I kind of got ahead of myself.
I I
So
I actually just I liked what you said just now in terms of John Walker being set up to fail. Now, I like it simply for the fact that if let's take it back to Captain America the First Avenger, okay? If by chance there was no Hydra agent to destroy the facility of where Steve was made, then the U.S. would have had an army of super soldiers. And with that being said, I don't believe there would have been a Captain America in general. The reason Steve became quote unquote Captain America was because he was the only one to get the serum, and he
mhm.
was potentially made into a mascot, not necessarily a soldier, you know? So fast forward to today where we see enter John Walker, who is a soldier, right? I don't believe the weight of that shield belongs to anybody else but I right now I can't even say Sam, but of a super soldier, you know, just because
Mhm.
of what Steve was made into, you know, if that makes sense. Does that make sense to you?
No, it does, especially because that is a topic of discussion in this particular episode. Like they discuss, I think, pretty heavily like the effects of the super soldier serum, right? Kind of building up to the point where John takes it, and I think it's Zemo who talks about how the serum inevitably corrupts the individual who takes it to a point of like supremacist, right? Referring specifically to Carly.
Right.
And as a rebuttal, I don't know if it was Sam or Bucky, but they're like, Steve was never corrupt, and he's like, yes, but there was no other Steve Rogers,
Right.
and so no, I think that stands. Like the serum is a very like is it highlights all aspects of the individual, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I just love the quote that the doctor says in Captain America, the first Avenger, where he's just like, bad, like good becomes great,
Mm-hmm.
bad becomes worse. Like it's just as simple as that. And so I think it's a discussion that we should have, especially for this as we're reviewing this first episode or
Say
episode 4.
yeah, and I want to continue with this episode, but I am gonna kind of veer off from this episode, just for a second, just because as far as this conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
I sent you a few images of the story of Isaiah Bradley, okay? And for those who watched the show, that was the first black super soldier. Now, in reading these, I actually read through I think the whole series. It's like 4 or 5 comics. I was just kind of glued.
I'm impressed.
I was kind of glued. And say with what we mentioned, right? Let's say in total in this experiment, they made it clear in the episode, maybe episode 3 or 2, that there were experiments done to these black soldiers. Now, in reading this comic, there were 5 that were successfully turned into super soldiers, but they were like, I think 3 or 4 of them were kind of disfigured, you know, because there were images of say this experiment going bad. And as you can see, if you saw it in Captain America, the First Avengers, it just went from skinny little Steve Rogers to a super jacked Steve Rogers. And
Right.
in this comic, they even show how, like, I have an image pulled up to where someone has taken the serum, he's strapped down to the table, but it's just like he's getting too jacked and he explodes, you know. So this was some of the things that happened in this comic book story that I thought was pretty interesting. But at the topic at hand, I didn't get a chance to send you this one. I actually just saw this earlier today. But say there was an image of one of the soldiers. I forgot the name, but he fell under the category of the super soldier serum going bad, and he ended up turning on the other black super soldiers, and it came down to the point to where Isaiah was the only one that survived, and we got that from the episode. So it was interesting to see, or more so to read this comic, just simply for the fact that it solidifies what we see in the show. Okay, it's not just a serum turning a regular human being into a super soldier, but it also shows the effect on them mentally, as far as how one person could be good and one person could seem good, but in actuality go bad from the effects of the serum.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, Isaiah. I won't even say luckily. Isaiah just happened to be the one to where he didn't go bad, but unfortunately for him in the MCU, he was locked up for 30 years. He wasn't locked up in the comic, um, but it just came to the point to where in the comic he did get captured by Hydra. They did experiment on him for a bit, but that was it. And then eventually he met Steve Rogers. So that's kind of how it was different from the MCU, to where Steve Rogers was frozen here in the MCU, but he eventually met Captain America in the comic book. So I kind of just wanted to throw that out there for the listening and viewing audience.
I love it. I
Yeah.
love it. And since we're on the topic of Isaiah, I feel like I had a couple of notes that were, I think, more so for the following episode.
Yeah.
I forget which one is the one where Sam visits him and he kind of expresses his distaste for him, potentially taking on the
That's
mantle,
episode 5.
you know.
Yeah.
But episode 5, it's okay. I'm gonna talk
Go
about it now,
for it.
just because I think it fits well. But I think there's so many parallels, besides Isaiah being essentially like a super soldier, like kind of like like Captain America, there's so many other parallels that they make, right?
Mm-hmm.
When he's talking about his like his history after having become like a super soldier, he discusses this point where a couple of his men, I don't know how many, he says like specific amount, but are captured, and
Mm-hmm.
essentially the government was going to bomb the evidence of their
Right.
existence. They've been captured, they're no longer any use to us, they're a liability at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And he disobeyed orders, right? Went to go save them, which he kind of states was um at almost to like no result, because they ended up dying at some point
Right.
anyway. But he gets punished for that, and Steve did pretty much the same thing
Mm-hmm.
back in the first film, right?
Right.
But instead he's like honored, right? He
Right.
becomes that figure. That's where like the legacy behind Steve is starting to build, right? He's showing up in all like the newspapers,
Mm-hmm.
all of that, right?
Yeah.
So that just highlights obviously like the differences that they've had, but also like the similarities and parallels. And another thing that I did like is like he talks about like the love of his life, right?
Mm-hmm.
They told her that he was dead, but she sent letters. I'm assuming because she believed he was still alive.
Right.
But when he finally got out, like she wasn't there. And I think that's such a parallel to Steve, right? He had the love of his life, Peggy. He gets frozen in the ice. He comes back years later, where he believes her not to be around anymore. But as we figure out in, I think it's Civil War. No, the
No.
second, the
Yeah. Winter
second
Soldier. Yeah.
Captain
Yeah.
America,
Mm-hmm.
we see Peggy come about, but it's too late. Like she's lived her life,
Right.
she's on her deathbed, all of that. So just a lot of parallels that we see between Captain America, but also highlighting the contrast in how they were treated with the government. With like
Right. And they
yeah.
highlight it in the comic to where it's not even a factor of telling the families that these super soldiers had died. The government in the comic book actually killed off the family, so it kind of it went dark
Wow.
to where
Mm-hmm.
they killed off everybody who they experimented on and their relatives, just to bury the whole situation. And I was like, what am I reading? And how did this, why was this given to kids whenever this dropped? Even though, like, say this story, this comic book, it dropped in, I think it said 2003, but even still, I'm just like, this is a little dark here, you know?
I mean, it's intense. Like, I mean, they're based on things that have happened in, our real world, right? That's where a lot of the villains and the storylines do get pulled,
Yeah.
right? Like, look
Yeah.
at Captain America and where he was birthed, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
his first comic has like Hitler on the cover,
Yeah.
So it's intense, but it's like it's the stuff that has happened in our history. And I do like that this series explores all of that, and just to continue on to like as we're continuing with episode 4, I love how we like barely got through like the first
Yeah.
few scenes of
Yeah. Yeah.
episode 4, but there's a lot. Like this is a great episode.
Yeah. Wait,
Something I wanted
hold
to
on. Before
go
you
ahead.
go further, I do want to say what's up to. We have somebody saying, "Hey, a first time commenter. This is Annie Claire." And what's up, Annie? How's it going? And I did peep that you bought a Team Grace tee. So shout out to Annie for supporting the stream. We appreciate you so much. And now you can continue.
Suck it, chill. Thank you for joining the stream, Annie. So I was going to kind of take it back to that scene with Bucky and the Dora Milaje,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because obviously the reason that they're here is because the Wakandans and Zemo have a deep history,
Oh,
right?
definitely.
Zemo,
100%.
um, not intentionally, but as a result of his bombing of the UN, when they're getting ready to ratify the
Mm-hmm.
Accords, that's where we see King T'Chaka, killed. And
Mm-hmm.
so obviously, like the Wakandans have very, very negative feelings towards Zemo getting out. But with that being said, I just wanted to highlight that I feel like that displays so much of their not just respect to Bucky, but their trust in Bucky. Because for them to let Zemo loose, even they gave him like a timeline, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, 8 hours or something like
Right.
that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for them to give that to Bucky, I just feel like it just displays how much they trust him, which I think is nice to see, especially because I think even here in this episode, and I feel like we progress from there, but Bucky doesn't trust himself fully. Like he's still on that route of recovery
Mm-hmm.
from the trauma, the PTSD, all the things from being the Winter Soldier. So this is just something I wanted to highlight because I thought it was really good. Like I really liked it, and I think this is the scene where we hear Bucky also talking in like Wakandan, and I thought just that was pretty awesome. Like he is one with like the people there.
Well, let's just say with his experience in Wakanda, let's just say he was kind of initiated. He went through like the healing process of getting the code words out of his brain so he didn't turn into the Winter Soldier. But he spent some time to rebuild himself because initially before Infinity War he was still, of course, like an outlaw. So regardless of the experiments working, there's no telling how long that he had been there just living among the Wakandans and becoming the quote unquote white wolf. So I would think that if anything, um I wouldn't want to say that he deserves that type of respect, but I feel like he earned it to the point to where he broke Zemo out for a reason, okay? And he just asked for some time to use Zemo, and then he would gladly hand Zemo off to the Wakandans because he had no intentions of hiding that from the Wakandans at all. He knew that they were
Mm-hmm.
coming, no matter what. It was like a matter of time.
Yeah.
Why break out somebody who took out the king of Wakanda? So
Mm-hmm.
if anything, that was gonna happen. It was only a matter of time, and yeah, the they just gave the White Wolf the the just a few hours before they took over, and then he ended up delivering towards the end of the series. So
And I think them calling him and giving him like the name of the White Wolf, I think just adds or just displays like the respect that they have for him. Like he's been like kind of how you said he's been what's the word you use, like kind of
initiated.
initiated with like the people of Wakanda. So I like that, and I would say like he earned that place with them. So
Yeah.
it's something I like a lot, and I just can't get enough of with the Dora Milaje. Well, we'll get into like their interaction with John Walker because
Yeah.
that is juicy, and
Mhm.
I love that scene. But before we do, I think something we didn't mention is kind of where we left off on the last episode together when we were reviewing episode
Mhm.
3, where we left the Flag Smashers, where we left Carly. They just bombed the GRC supply center, which
Mhm.
is huge. It's a very big moment in seeing the turn within Carly, right? A big topic of this episode is very much like the effects of the serum.
Yeah.
And, she kind of took that decision upon herself. This is like the first of many instances where you see a lot of hesitation from the Flag Smashers,
Right.
right? Prior to this, like they're very much on board with everything she's kind of like commanding. Like they are not hesitant with anything. They believe in her cause and they believe in her. And we saw that hesitation from that one member in episode 3, and then here we see um she has like I think there's just kind of like they're reflecting on what had just happened, and you can see just like the feel of the team, and it's just no longer that same cohesion you see in like episode 2, right? Where
Right.
they're being like essentially like housed and fed by people in the community who see their cause. Like they're not as unified in that, and that just kind of gets progressively more highlighted as we get into the next episodes. But that's kind of where we left them off. And of course, they're obviously mourning like Doña, um,
Mm-hmm.
what do they call her? I think
Mama
they
Danya.
call her Mama Doña. There
Mm-hmm.
you go, there you go. And so it's I think this is a good segue into her interaction with Sam, which you kind of talked about a little bit earlier. So I'm gonna let you take it away.
Sure. But before we get into that, like, say the last week when we were talking about her, I still believe, regardless of her actions with the GRC Center, right? I still believe that she is someone who took the super soldier serum but has yet to have any negative effects. Okay. And by negative effects, I mean mentally. And she has a mission, and just like Steve had a mission, and all she's doing is making sure the mission goes through, and she's doing whatever it takes to make sure it's completed. Now, in comparison to John Walker or any other person where the serum goes bad, I can't say that she falls under that category just because she's doing all of this for the greater good of the displaced people. Okay, and yes, the bombing tragedy. Did those people deserve to get bombed? No, but did did the no, I'm not gonna go in that route because I was gonna bring Steve into this conversation. But no, when it comes down to her beliefs, I still believe that she is or was more so headstrong in the series. I wouldn't say that she was someone turned evil by the serum. It's just unfortunate with the circumstances that she was kind of put into, if that makes sense.
I see the point you're making, and there's no opposition to the fact that the cause she's fighting for is legitimate, right? The GRC is not really looking at this population of people and seeing like what their struggle is, right? Like I think it's in the following episode where we even see a glimpse of the conversations they're having right before they're about to take the vote, and a lot of them are just very dismissive of the struggles that the displaced people are kind of trying to get to be heard. Like they talk about the resources that they're really not in a rush to send over, even though
Right.
they know they're in need. So, absolutely, the cause stands. But I still would say, like, this is very evidently like the influence of the serum because I think that's, I mean, and who's to say, right? Who's to say if her feelings would have shifted to the extreme of killing these people, not just like trapping them and sending the message? But I think it's highlighted in not just the conversation of this particular episode about how the serum corrupts people, but even in the response of like her teammates, like they noticed this change, like that was evidently not their mission, right? They weren't gonna be killing people because it just seems like that was something that like may have been established prior
But
because they're
see,
very
but
taken aback by her choices.
this is where I'll counter that because we're gonna talk about this series no matter what from to episode 6. So I'm gonna bring up episode 6 here. Okay, the reason why I want to counter that is because her in comparison to John Walker. Okay, John Walker did what he did in episode 4 to the Flag Smasher, and this was apparent that he is breaking down, right? Now, Carly kind of going along throughout this whole entire series, there was no breakdown. And then later in episode 6 where she started to be brash and said she was going to take out the hostages, I would say that these are more so moves of desperation as opposed to a mental breakdown of a super soldier. She was trying to desperately find some way to make her notion heard to the rest of the world. So say uh if John Walker, Falcon, or the Winter Soldier didn't show up to the GRC in episode 6, then I would have said everything would have gone to plan and nobody would have gotten hurt because the rest of her team believe that they were just going to have a conversation to sway the change or change the minds of the people of GRC. It wasn't going to get
Mm-hmm.
into violence or anything like that. It just happened to happened the way it did because of everybody else kind of closing in. So I don't see her as a bad person. I just think that it just came down to the point to where she responded to the hand that she was dealt, as opposed to Walker not. He could have handled that situation very differently in episode 4. Instead of taking out a flag smasher, he could have just more so taken down a flag smasher, captured him, that because he knew that people were watching, right? But it was the rage that was kind of, I don't want to say influenced, but kind of tapped in by the serum that turned him into what he did, or into what he was.
Yeah. And just going back to kind of what the serum does, right? It's not just enhancing the good, it's enhancing the bad
Mm-hmm.
parts. And so just to going back and comparing that to John and to Carly, like both of them, I wouldn't innately call them bad. Like we see John, who's like, I'm just trying to be the best cap that I am. Like he has those flaws before he takes the serum where he kind of gets taken away by his ego and his pride and his frustration with not, getting to where he needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
And the serum enhances all of those feelings. And then, of course, leading up to the point of Lamar's death,
Right.
who's to say if he hadn't taken the serum, if he would not have killed the Flag Smasher? We don't know, but we know that his decision making process was definitely enhanced by the serum, the good and the bad. And the thing I think applies to Carly. It looks differently for sure because their objectives are so different.
Right.
With Carly, like her objective was the same throughout the series. Like she's trying to get the GRC to see their cause. But I still stand by the fact that the serum is enhancing, like, and putting her on, like, kind of like how Zemo and Sam like have this conversation of like pushing her into like the extremist side. Like even Sam, when he has that confrontation with her after the ceremony for Mama Doña,
Mm-hmm.
he's trying to make the comparisons between her behavior, her erratic behavior, and the exact thing that she's trying to dismantle, right? Where she can't see it. And I mean, obviously, we didn't get to really see Carly before the
Right.
serum, but being that this is such a highlighted topic, and within this episode 4, right, like the effects of the serum, and Carly's very much like the highlight of that topic. Like, look at Carly, like she's going and steering off where she's not, what's the word, filtering, I think, her decision making. And I think that's even just more highlighted by like her teams and their reactions to what she's doing, and the desperation, I mean, adds to that, right? Like her feelings and who she is aren't like being created by the serum. It's just, it's enhancing everything, and if those emotions she's feeling are the most prominent, it's enhancing all those things. The
But
same goes with John,
but
you
who's to
know.
say in that conversation with Sam, things could have gone a different way if John Walker didn't interrupt, because it looked like Sam was actually reasoning with her, and actually it could have gone to the point where he had gotten to her, to make her think of things differently. But unfortunately, it was interrupted by someone whose main objective was to take her down. Sam wasn't looking to initially take her down. He was just he said he's all for her cause. He's just not with the way that she's fighting it. And there could have been a moment to where she understood where Sam was coming from. And I feel like even though it was interrupted and it almost kind of made things worse, she still saw what Sam was trying to do. Hence why um, she said that she wasn't trying to hurt his family, for one, and two, I think she was trying to actually talk to him, even though the secret motive was to take out John Walker in their second meeting. But
Mm-hmm.
I feel like if things went as planned, and all of this, of course, is hypothetical, then the series would have gone in a different direction. But I would just say John Walker ruined it all.
Oh, I don't disagree.
Right.
And absolutely, like Sam was definitely getting to her. I just really don't think that it's, what's the word? I don't really think it's like negotiable that the serum didn't affect her, because that's like the main thing of that they're having this conversation. So it's not to say that she can't be reasoned with. Definitely, like I think John instigated her feeling of almost betrayal because she was like, "Oh, so this was your play all along." Like
Right.
that first conversation she has with Sam. So I don't think that it's like to say that one of those exists without the other. Like we can say she's being influenced by the serum and still say that she still believes in her cause and that she could have been swayed by Sam. But I think bottom line, yes, we agree. John Walker just jacked it up, which is why in this episode I get so frustrated with him. You know,
So before we move on, because I do want to kind of move forward.
we're
So
we're still in episode 4.
just when it comes down to the super soldier serum in general, why do you believe Steve wasn't corrupted like that? Because yes, he was frozen throughout the years, but he did get years after being frozen to where there could have been plenty of opportunities of him going bad. So
Mhm.
why do you think he is so called special in this situation and makes him different from Carly?
I mean, Steve is definitely the outlier, not the rule. Like, period. Especially when it comes to the super soldier serum, you know. And I think it falls back to like the doc's like initial reasoning for choosing Steve. You know, like he's not trying to choose the perfect soldier. He wants to choose like a good man. You know, and that's that conversation that he has with the doc. Like, just remember, like, bottom line, like, or just like always be like that good man. And that's why he chose Steve. And I think it was the doctor's like definitive reasoning and like choosing him and also the conversations that I have had that kept him from steering off that track because he was amazing before the serum, you know. So then once the serum was like administered, it just enhanced the good. I mean, it's not to say that he was perfect, you know,
Mm-hmm.
but he kind of was, and that's kind of the thing about him.
But see, and that's the
So I
thing.
don't know.
Like,
I would just fall back to that particular scene in Captain America, you know?
who's to say? Even though it didn't happen, he could have easily during the blip uh turn into uh another Ronin, you know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Because if anything, right then and there, Hawkeye was at a loss, and let's say he became corrupted, and eventually went dark. Um, I don't know. I just feel like this whole super soldier conversation, it's I don't want to say delicate, but it's wishy washy because it's like to the point to where we can put somebody in one category and then another in another, but they're somewhat similar. Like, but it's sensitive. I would love to move forward. So where are we at in episode 4? We get up to the point to
Ah.
where the meeting goes bad, okay?
Hmm.
And Zemo catches up with Carly, shoots her, and destroys all but one vial that
Yeah.
John happens to find, okay? And then that leads to the conversation he and Lamar has as far as would they. And that conversation I feel like influenced it because who knows if John had taken it before this conversation, So who would say that being that Lamar said he would have definitely taken it, that would have been what pushed him to take the super soldier serum?
Yeah, and I would say like I mean I definitely think that in grabbing the serum, I think he had the intentions to take it, and obviously he like I don't think he took it beforehand because I feel like if anything he was trying to kind of
Reason.
just get
Yeah.
Lamar's you know,
Yeah.
like we do with any friend, right? When we're gonna make a big decision, we talk to our friends.
Right.
So I would definitely say there was an influence there because if Lamar would have said something completely different, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe something similar to the conversation that Sam and Bucky had with that, you know, very similar tone. You know, I think it's Zemo who asked Sam, like, oh, would you take the serum? And he, without hesitation, says no, you know?
Right.
So who knows? Like, maybe if Lamar had a different, like, angle, like, maybe he would not have taken the serum. But I think what pushed him to take it even more is his interaction with the Dora Milaje because he gets a really, really big hit to his ego after that interaction. He's like,
They weren't
they
even
weren't even,
super soldiers. Yeah.
yeah. So I think let's just say after the conversation he has with Lamar, because keep in mind in that conversation, like John has a very like I think astute like self like perspective in saying like I'm not as perfect as like you see me,
Right.
referring to Lamar because
Right.
Lamar is like, you're my best friend, you're amazing, you would be an amazing candidate. Like he doesn't see the flaws in John,
Mhm.
and John's like, keep in mind all the things we had to do to get those medals of honors. Keep in mind all the things. So
Right.
John recognizes the aspect in himself that may not be worthy of taking the serum,
Mhm.
where there is a risk of having that become enhanced because he knows this, right?
Yeah.
He even says it himself in episode 2 when he first interacts with Falcon and Bucky, like the super soldier serum doesn't have a good track record. He knows these things.
Yeah.
And so I think who's maybe he wasn't definitive in what he wanted, right?
Yeah.
Lamar was the one definitely to kind of push, but I really think it was that interaction with the Dora Milaje that was like, nah, I gotta take this because they just kicked my ass
Yeah.
and they weren't even super soldiers, you know?
Well, he needed to step his hand to hand combat up because
You
obviously
know, it's
they're on point. Respect to the Dora, even though they're fictional. But all in all, when it comes down to what they did, like Bucky, or no, it was Sam that warned him. Is like, you may want to fight Bucky before we even
yes.
get with the Dora, and just that scene in general. It was good simply for the fact that I always want to see the Dora do something crazy, and it was just two of them, and one of them disabled Bucky's arm like it was nothing. They were like, "Yeah, we built that, fam." This is like, we definitely know where the shut off switch is, so let me
It was
just
like a
pop
fail
pop
safe.
pop pop twist, and your arm's gone. You're done.
See, there's something that with that, like I think the the reaction to Bucky after like the arm gets like dismantled or it gets like ripped off, like I wonder like what the feel was. I remember my partner saying like, oh, like I feel like Bucky felt a little hurt by that, like oh, like so this the security I thought you felt to me or like the trust wasn't maybe real because you always had a fail safe, and that
Yeah.
was a perspective I didn't look at. So I just wanted to bring it up because rewatching it this time around for the show, I was like, yeah, like there's something in his response to that having happened, not just the shock of the fact of like, whoa, I didn't know my arm could do that.
Right.
Like I think there was a little bit more to it. But overall that scene, I love it, and I do love that it kind of starts off with Sam having that like that phrase of like you might want to like fight Bucky before you fight the Dora Milaje
Right.
because they both have moments where they make statements where they show their respect for each other and their abilities despite the banter,
Mhm.
despite like the back and forth in their relationship. Like I think very similar to when Bucky's like, do you know who this is, like in is it Baltimore or something.
Yeah. Right.
I like that because it just highlights that they both see good in each other,
Right.
whether they want to say it or not. So I did
Mhm.
like that statement from Sam.
Yeah. So say fast forward because he Walker he gets beat up by the Dora. He has the conversation with Lamar, and then from there, it's easy to assume that he takes the super soldier serum. So
Hmm.
now, fast forward towards the end of this episode, um, they set another meeting, and even though it was to meet Sam alone with Carly, it was more so a misdirection to initially take out John Walker. Now, John Walker shows up to the party juiced up, and this is where I was it Sam or was it Bucky? It was just like, what'd you do when they noticed that he was kind of. It was
It was
Sam. Yeah,
Sam.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So Sam notices, and um, this whole fight, I was more so impressed with Sam here, just because he's the only person in this building that's not a super soldier, and he is holding his own against everybody, So
Hmm.
I gave Sam more props here just because it was here and in the last episode, but more so here to where he's just a man with his wings, but he's still fighting these super soldiers. Like he's listen. I think I mentioned it in one episode to where, yeah, we were talking about Hawkeye having to rescue what's her name, and having to go against Vision, and I think it's the same deal to where Sam, he's like, I gotta go against these super soldiers here, but I gotta do what I gotta do, and he
Mhm.
does it, and he does it well.
And on that point, I think it also just kind of highlights why he's like the perfect fit to take on the mantle, at the end of the series. But, he comes and takes it from a place of just trying to do the right thing, in contrast to John, where it's very much an ego thing. Like, I think he really just wants to take out, well, not just Carly, but the Flag Smashers, most sort to have a point on his side as Captain America,
Yeah.
which he's struggling desperately to get. Whereas like Sam, like that's not present. Like he's not looking for power. He's not looking for an ego boost. Like he's just trying to do what's right. Like so much so he, gave up the shield initially. And I think that's a parallel that he heavily has with Steve,
Yeah.
to put him in line for taking on the mantle. But no, absolutely. Like everyone else is juiced up.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And he's the outlier. And you know what's funny? I just wanted to mention this, but before this series, I didn't realize that Bucky had like a form of a super soldier serum in him.
Yeah.
I thought he just had a cool arm. That's literally me. Like I had
Oh my
no
god.
idea.
Oh Grace, man. Oh
I
man.
know. I'm being
No.
vulnerable here. I'm sharing this. I didn't have to share this.
It's fine. I appreciate the share. I'm sorry for laughing, Grace, but yes.
Oh no, that's totally fine. It's laughable. Like
Yeah.
I remember watching the series, and I think it's in the scene where um John makes that statement of like, sorry, but Bucky, but like it doesn't have a good track record in reference to the serum, and I'm like, wait a minute, does Bucky have a form of the serum? And
Mhm.
evidently it is.
Yeah.
So
And I don't know if it was shown in Captain America: The First Avenger, as far as, oh no, it wasn't, because initially Bucky quote unquote died, which he didn't. But who's to say he wasn't a part of, uh, kind of like Isaiah was like, of an army that was taken by Hydra and experimented on, and Bucky just happened to be the only one to initially have the serum work. But then eventually we learn in Civil War to where they get more of this serum from, um, what's Stark's dad's name? Do you know?
um Howard Stark.
Yeah, Howard Stark. So
Yeah.
if anything, uh, just like Isaiah Bradley, Bucky was an experiment gone right. He, I would assume, just lost his arm from the fall off of a train, which
Oh
is
yeah.
totally
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
understandable. But in I think in Captain America Winter Soldier, I think it was almost maybe established that he was a super soldier from his able to handle Steve the way that he was handling him. But I don't think they
Yeah, and
verbally
it
said it.
makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you for giving me that credit.
Right.
I mean, it makes sense. Like looking back with all the flashbacks we get of him being like experimented on, like the shocking, when he's being like frozen, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I think it was established where Grace just missed it. That's
Mhm.
okay. That is okay.
Yep.
Um,
All
so
good.
before we move on to episode 5, we need to talk
Yeah.
about that finishing
Oh
scene.
yeah.
Um,
Go for it.
Go ahead.
No, you do
Okay, I take it. Okay, okay, I'll take it. Well, this is where we see John lose it because
Mhm.
Lamar dies,
Mhm.
right? Carly pushes him against the pillar, and Lamar is not enhanced; like he
Yeah.
dies as a
Yeah.
process, and it's he was unhinged before he took the serum,
Yeah.
and that serum just enhanced all of those feelings, those insecurities, and add the fact that he just lost his best friend.
Yeah.
So he goes after the Flag Smashers, and he takes out his rage on one of the Flag Smashers, and it's very specific on the one that he ends up killing. It's the one that earlier in this episode talks about how he loved Captain
Yeah.
America growing up as a kid,
Yeah.
right? He's like this, like I saw him as the figure that most people see him as, and he mentions to Carly, like, I think you could have been the next Captain America, because he believes in her.
Yeah.
But it's very specific that it was him that it was killed, because like imagine being that. Like, they say don't meet your heroes, but
Mm-hmm.
this is like an extreme. Like, he is killed by the man who's holding or like wearing the mantle he used to love,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And for an MCU film, like, this is shocking, and it stands out because it is brutal.
Yeah.
Like, to see blood covered on that shield and just hearing it slam and slam and slam. You don't see it, but he's slamming it into what you would assume is left to be like a dismantled, like, or just disfigured
Right.
body. Wow. That is such a strong finish to an already amazing episode. I remember just being speechless watching this the first time. We expect this kind of like gruesomeness with like DCU and
Mm-hmm.
everything. And it's one of the things I think the MCU has had a lot of critique in, and like that's not as dark, as broody. There's not as much
We'll say
drama or
we
extreme,
saw
but
something similar. Like we saw almost shot for shot as far as how John Walker finished this Flag Smasher. It was the same way that Steve finished Iron Man in Civil War. You know, he just took that
yeah,
shield
yeah.
up, bow. But he could have ended Tony, but he ended up just turning Tony's armor off. You know,
What
so
a
you
parallel!
know
And again, another parallel, but that also displays
another.
the contrast between these two characters. And it's one I didn't think of. I didn't
Yeah,
think of that. And I
yeah,
think, I mean, like, yes, we've seen something similar, and I think that's meant to highlight the fact that just how different, Steve and John are.
yeah.
Because, Steve's intention wasn't to kill Tony,
Right,
right? He could have. Like,
right.
he was like just laying there, basically paralyzed because the suit was shut
Definitely.
down. But here, like, John, like, I'm saying, like, the brutality of it is
Mm-hmm.
just insane. Insane, not just for the MCU, but just period,
Yeah,
but even more so because of what we're seeing. We don't expect that from the MCU, which is why it's so like big.
definitely. So, last thing, okay, because we're about to go to episode 5, but I just wanted to point out something to see if you actually noticed it. Okay, so in this chase with John Walker chasing the Flag Smasher, I thought it was interesting that both of these people are super soldiers, but they're not running through the city like Bucky, T'Challa, and Rogers was in Civil War. There was no super speed. It just looked like two normal men just running regular. I was like, are they even super at all? Like, cause Bucky was running through that tunnel like faster than cars, you know. But
Hmm.
I feel like if anything, if I was in this foot race behind John Walker, I probably would have caught up with him too. But I don't know. That was
Let
just
me just
something that I
say,
noticed.
I did notice it. I wouldn't say, I don't know if it was this particular episode, but it because in Captain America: The First Avenger, like, it's when Steve initially takes the serum, like, he evidently is running faster. He's like
Right.
surprised at himself. He's like, "Look at me."
Yeah.
I was gonna say this. Like, this is not the serum I would take. First of all, I don't get abs.
Okay.
I don't get like defined
Uh
arms.
huh.
Like, the doctor says it in earlier episodes. My my serum is subtle. There's
Yeah.
like I'm like, I don't want that. Like, I want to look jacked.
Yeah.
So the fact that I don't look jacked and I'm slower, this is not the one for me. Like, if I'm gonna lose or go, off the edge like John, at least I want to look buffly doing it. So I'll just leave it there.
Okay. All right. So episode 5 uh starts with the Battle of John Walker. And it comes to the point to where he feels like he felt like he did what was right, but at the end of the day he was the one that killed him, and then they were just like, no, it wasn't, like it was Carly.
This is like borderline
Right.
psychosis because
Right.
he's like justifying, like, but I think he really believes it in this moment, like justifying his actions. Like, he killed her. He's like, no, he didn't, bro. Like, it was not him. It was
Right.
Carly.
Right.
And it's like, there's a particular like part in like that back and forth, like that battle, that having that fight where he's like, why are you making me do this? I'm like, no one is making you try to kill Sam, because he's like, with what I'm assuming, like, based on the way he's attacking them,
Mm-hmm.
like he's trying to kill him off. Like in particular, Sam, because I think it's Sam who finally says like, "Oh, you got to give up the shield. Oh, you got to give us the shield." And then John says something along the lines of like, "Oh, this
This
is
is
what
what you
you
wanted.
wanted all
Yeah.
along," or so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So he sees Sam at this point as a threat to what he's trying to still maintain, which is that persona of like, "I am Captain America," you know?
Right, but he even said that he's like, I am Captain America, and he was about to actually kill Sam if Bucky didn't step in at the last second. He had that same pose of about to take the shield and stab Sam with it,
And
but
then Bucky,
right. So right then and there, it is totally clear, 100% that John is off his rocker, and he did not need to take the super soldier serum at all. 100%.
we knew this man did not
Right.
should not have taken the serum, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it's I remember I was watching this yesterday, getting prepped for the show, and I was just like, what a gaslighter. He's like, why are you making me do this? It's like as he's like trying to kill Sam, and they're
Right.
like, bro, we're just trying to like calm you
Right. All I
down.
asked for was the shield,
Yeah.
my man. Like I didn't want to fight you. I just asked for the shield, and Sam mentioned it. He's like, "Listen, I think he mentioned uh he's like, "Listen, all you got to say is your side." And
Yeah.
like he was trying to help him out. It's like on some all you got to do is this, and hopefully they hear you just because of your decorated background. But
Hmm.
with that being said, John did what he did, and Sam again holding his own. When Bucky was out, Sam was still doing his thing. So more
Yeah.
props to Sam here, episode 5. Yep.
I like this. I like this takedown, and it's I don't know. I like seeing the way it was like choreographed, like with Bucky and Sam,
Mm-hmm.
fighting off John. And yep, again, like these other two are enhanced, but Sam still holds his own.
Yeah.
Yes, he got like de-winged. His wings got clipped in
Mm-hmm.
this fight sequence, but at the end of the day, he got the shield and he was wiping off the blood. And I think from here we segue into at this point, I believe they've been like shut down in terms of like they're not meant to be involved in the case behind like Carly and the Flag
Mm-hmm.
Smashers, but we get the scene that I had forgotten about, but you brought it up in our last episode where we see Torres get the wings,
Mm-hmm.
right? So kind of nudging and maybe hinting at what a potential season 2 might bring about with Torres taking on like the mantle of the
Yeah.
Falcon. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah. Um, because I don't think it was like I didn't think too much of it until you and I discussed it in person, and then I think you told me Torres was eventually Falcon in the comic book. So
Mm-hmm.
in watching it, I was like, oh, he got the wings, so that makes 100% to the point to where they're going to eventually make him into the new Falcon. So,
Absolutely,
um,
absolutely. And
oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, along kind of like these scenes, we see them addressing like the international incident, right? The government is like officially disowning John Walker, like
Mm-hmm.
removing him, like basically like disassociating them from John Walker, because obviously the world was watching,
Right.
right? The
Oh,
world
right. It's online. It was
saw.
on Instagram. It was definitely on TikTok. Every social media that everybody had, YouTube, everybody had their phones out watching John Walker. So it's known worldwide that John Walker, aka Captain America, killed somebody in cold blood. It wasn't like a hand to hand fight. It was just more so John Walker murdering somebody in broad daylight.
Yes. And then Val's the one who kind of highlights it just as it is. Like these guys and the ties are just, protecting their image. Like they're not upset at what you did. They're upset that essentially you, in the Captain American suit, as their mascot, if you will, are doing this like brutal, brutal murder.
Right.
And that scene when he's pretty much getting chewed out by the government, like I have empathy for him. Like I don't like John Walker, but I just feel like I try to force myself to look at it from a different perspective. And I can't help myself to have that empathy because much like what we've established, like Carly's not a bad person. There's complexity to a lot of these quote unquote villains,
Mm-hmm.
and John Walker definitely falls into that category. Like he went into this with good intentions. He's like, I just want to do the job and I want to do it right. He crumbled, and so it's really sad, especially because we see the response from his wife, who's just like seeing the love of her life getting chewed out for just in his he's like trying to do the job, but
Yeah.
obviously just falling under like the government set him up to fail.
Yeah.
Like the expectations were just so high. You just can't fill that shoe. And this is where we first see Val.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe this is the first time we see her, correct?
Yeah.
Because I think this came out before Black
Yeah.
Widow, right?
Yep.
So this was supposed to be, if I'm remembering correctly, the second appearance of Val, because Black Widow was supposed to appear like months and months before, but obviously pandemic
Yeah.
rearranged
Yeah.
all of these releases. So we were like, who the hell is this? Like this was kind of big, right? Because
Right.
she comes in and kind of disturbs the atmosphere. Like she's very perky. She's introducing her long name, and she's like,
Mm-hmm.
call me Val, but don't call me Val, but I'm Val.
Right.
And she's like essentially telling him like we'll be in touch, like you now work for me
Mm-hmm.
to a degree,
Yeah.
like your skill set can be used, like I know you took the serum, I know you don't have the shield, like that's like it shows kind of where she is in terms of power or just like intelligence, because how would she know that he took the shield
Right.
or that he took the serum, I'm sorry,
Mm-hmm.
that he took the serum.
Mm-hmm.
So that's our first introduction to Val.
Yeah. And with Val, um, actually no, I don't have anything else to add. Just because at this point, being that it was before Black Widow, she is introduced as a mystery.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know if she works for any agency of the U.S. government. She just comes up with a blank business card and it's like, "I'll be in touch. Answer my call." Like,
Yeah,
answer my call when I call, basically. And
done.
me, I would have been like, if you show up as unknown, I'm sorry.
John is desperate
I
though. He is desperate for somebody to like
like
be
validate
on
him.
his
Yeah.
side.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
100%.
Yep.
100%. And then from here I think we end up in Sokovia. This is where we see
Not yet. Not quite. Because
what happens before.
we go to Baltimore, back to Baltimore,
I'm
and
so certain Sokovia happens before Baltimore.
oh, okay.
But either one, honestly, doesn't matter in terms of the order. We can dive into Baltimore first and then revisit Sokovia.
You can go ahead and go into Sokovia because I think I have it as Baltimore and then I think okay.
Into like
Yeah,
the
yeah,
following
yeah,
events.
yeah,
Okay, that's
yeah.
fine. The biggest thing with Sokovia is this is where Bucky knows to find Zemo. I like the interaction because like Bucky sets it up like he's going to finish Zemo
Mm-hmm.
and he doesn't, and then it's like the Dora Milaje come and like take him away.
Right.
But the way that Zemo and Bucky leave off, like there's a sense of like respect and like almost like a I don't know, like there's almost like a buddy feel there, like they're he's just like so long, friends. Like they're leaving with no ill will or something like that. Like
Right.
it's interesting. I'm curious if they're planning to do something more with that. But I thought it was interesting to kind of see their relationship. And the other thing I just kind of have a note here is just like the respect that I think the Dora Milaje have, and more so Ao.
Mm-hmm.
I was waiting to see if you would correct me if I
I'm
was
done
wrong.
correcting that
Uh,
now.
um, but we just see their interaction. I know during the time of this like episode, people were kind of like shipping them. I think we just want Bucky to find love, like how we want Loki to find somebody. I think we're like Bucky needs, and I was kind of looking into the history of Bucky just to see like who are some like love interests he's had in history. And I think the biggest ones I've seen was Nat and Sharon.
Mm-hmm.
I think I saw Sharon on that list, but it's not like vast.
Yeah.
But the other potential is Sarah,
Mm-hmm.
Sam's sister, which I think is so funny. Like he turns to her, he's like, Bucky. And then she's like kind of like, hi.
Giddy. Right.
I kind of want to see that, and then Sam like flags it, right? He's like looking at him, and then he later goes in like, "We're cool, but you can't. You no, like this cannot
That
be a
is
thing."
listen. That is the the overly protective brother over the sister. So if it was anybody, it's not even just Buck. If any of his friends came up and was like, "Oh hey, I'm chill. What's up?" Sam would have told me, be like, "Yo, back the fuck up," like So I
I
get
I
it.
I
I
love
get
that
it.
interaction. Also, I love seeing Bucky like I don't know, like soft, like in just like I feel like the scene I'm thinking of is when he sees Cap in Infinity War when he just gets off the boat or off the ship into Wakanda. And there was so many memes about it where it's like, oh, I just want someone to look at me the way that Bucky looks at Steve
Yeah.
because he has like the long Jesus haircut
Mm-hmm.
and he just has like this really wide smile. And so it reminds me of that, like the way he has the interaction with Sarah. And I just love those little moments with him.
I think with that because yeah, Sokovia happened. I did want to kind of touch on something that you said as far as Zemo is concerned. I think Zemo left off with saying that he respects Bucky for what he did as far as bringing the Dora, and he has no ill will in terms of being that Bucky's a super soldier. He has no ill will in terms of anything towards Bucky, So I
Yeah.
think they kind of landed on a mutual respect, like you said, knowing that Bucky, if anything, could have taken the opportunity to take him out
Hmm.
just because of what happened with the King of Wakanda. He blamed Bucky for this, and hence the whole movie of Civil War. So at the end of
Hmm.
the day, I feel like Bucky had every right to go full Winter Soldier on Zemo, and Zemo understood that. And then being that he didn't, he was like, okay, I get it. We're cool. I know I'm going to jail, but we're good. So that's kind of how I read that situation.
Absolutely. And I think, I mean, Zemo falls into that category of just like characters that I think the MCU, like villains in particular, that they are displaying with a little bit more dimension than just blatantly bad.
Right.
Like, if you look at the perspective of Zemo, and this is way back from like Civil War, like, you're like, it's hard to not see his point. You know what I mean? In terms of like, he's kind of out here to destroy what he sees as the establishment that resulted in his family's death, you know?
Well then with that,
Um,
I would parallel him to Wanda, but I would say he was more successful. Even though he wasn't successful, he was more successful than Wanda because either way, both of them were affected by Stark technology, whether if it's
mhm,
Ultron or a missile that landed but didn't explode. So Zemo just happened to be uh, intelligent military wise to take the time to plan out the destruction of the Avengers as opposed to Wanda. She was just following an android and she just had
mhm.
her powers. So Zemo is an intelligent person no matter what. And I think it's displayed with what we've seen in the MCU to where, yes, he was a quote unquote bad guy, but again, like Carly, he did it for the good reasons of Sokovia or to better the world by ridding the world of super soldiers and their possibilities of going bad and turning into supremacists like Carly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think he's one in a long line of like well developed, like dimensional and like complicated villains that I think that MCU has been creating. So agreed,
Yeah.
100%.
Okay. All right. So I don't want to, because we already touched Isaiah before in Baltimore, so I don't really want to get into that. But before we move into episode 6, I do want to chat about how episode 5, this is where we actually see Sharon Carter. She hires the French assassin. I don't even know his
Beltruck.
name.
Beltruck.
Yeah,
I
so
think it's I forget the first name, but I think his last name is Beltruck. I'm pretty sure I'm saying it wrong. But we know who we're talking
yeah,
about,
yeah,
the
yeah,
French
yeah.
dude. The French dude.
And then from there, I think this goes to because Carly has made it into the states, into New York, and she meets with this French guy. You know, is that episode? That's episode 5, right?
That is still episode 5. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's correct.
yeah. Did you want to continue from there?
I do want to add a little bit of that because, of course, like we had this conversation in the last episode, just talking about Sharon and the power broker and all of that. And this series definitely leaves off with you to believe that she is the power broker. Like, there's a lot of definitive like scenes that try to allude you to
We were
that.
gonna get to
She
that. I
never.
promise you. I promise you. We were gonna
We
get
will.
to
We will. We will. And I was just
that.
gonna say, she never like says explicitly yes, right? It's other people kind of falling to that
That's what I
conclusion.
was
But
gonna
this
say.
is like another, yeah. So it still leaves the door open
Mm-hmm.
for, for that not to be the case. I mean, I'm biased. I just want to see it. I just feel like it would
Yeah.
be such a cool thing to explore.
Yeah.
But this is the first piece where we're like, like kind of taking it back to the perspective of watching this for the first time. You're like, why is she hiring him? And he makes a statement, Beltruck, or hold on, I think I wrote it down. Georges, this is like his first name, the
Mm-hmm.
French
Yeah.
dude.
Yeah. I
He
saw that in the
says
subtitles. It said George with an S. O. Georges. Yeah.
Georges. Yeah. I'm assuming it's Georges Beltruck. And so he says something like, so he's hired, he's like, I'm hired to kill the Falcon, like, or I'm here to kill the Falcon.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and so I'm wondering, was he hired to kill the Falcon, or did Sharon hire him to spy on Carly, but it's his motive to also kill the Falcon? I'm wondering, and I think it might just be the latter. But it made me wonder just rewatching, and I was like, okay, because it's not definitively stated. I think
Right.
at the end we know he was there to spy on Carly,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's just an interesting piece, you
Yeah.
know.
It is. We don't know, or we don't get a definitive idea of what her motives are with the French guy. She just said, "Here's another chance to take out Falcon." You know, so like
Yeah.
we don't know for sure what he or what she has him doing. If it's either spying on Carly, or because I doubt that she wanted the French guy to take out Falcon, because at the end of the day, Sam has already offered this pardon, you know. So
Mhm.
why ruin the chance of the pardon to give the French guy satisfaction on losing money, you know?
Yeah, no, I see that point. So if anything, I think it would just lean on the fact that most likely it was just for the aspect of spying,
Yeah,
and I think her pull on him was just like, oh, you get a shot to like take out the Falcon, you
gotcha.
know.
Yeah.
And something we get in this, I labeled it the frisbee tossing scene, and it's like a heart to heart where Sam and Bucky are just kind of talking about where they're leaving off with like the shield,
Yeah.
and Bucky gives like Sam the true perspective, like, I didn't understand your perspective of what it meant to be taking on the shield, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry for being so harsh on that.
Yeah.
But I do love like the tough love that Sam gives him, and like, do the work. Like, you're avenging, not amending. And we kind of touched on that on the last episode, and I think Sam just kind of worded it perfectly, because we were talking about how he's like taking out the easy targets. You're taking
Right.
out people who you put in
Right.
power, but you're not doing the hard part. That's the piece that I think you're like missing to feel whole,
Mm-hmm.
and then just to kind of wrap up that little scene, I like how as they're walking away, I think Bucky says like, "Oh, like partners," and then he's
Co-workers.
like, "No, a team, professional partners, coworkers, guys
Mm-hmm.
with a mutual friend," and then they leave off of like, "We're a couple of guys." Are you
Yeah.
good with that? Yes. So I love that, and I labeled it defining the relationship, and
Right.
it's complicated.
I would agree to the point to where initially we talked about it in episode 2, because that's where they eventually met up, to where their brotherhood wasn't really established, and we kind of see them bickering back and forth, but at that point they were more so people that had a mutual friend.
Hmm.
But it wasn't until this scene in this episode to where it wasn't even just this scene. It was even the camaraderie of Bucky coming to work on the boat. You know, from there it's
Yes.
like
Yeah.
establishing that bond that they are quote unquote brothers in arms. Because I know in
Hmm.
militaries, everybody when it comes down to it, no, they're not related by blood, but once they get out, they are forever brothers no matter what. So I feel like, with that being said, with everything that they've gone through since Captain America and the Winter Soldier, it has grown to the point to where now, no matter what, if Bucky needs Sam, Sam would be there, and vice versa.
Yeah, and he says it's like, oh, like give me a call, I'll be there, like before they part. So it's a beautiful scene. I love when he shows up. I love specifically the scene where we see Bucky show up because I think they're like, oh, how are we gonna get this off the truck? And then like he just comes in with his one arm and so I love that scene. And I think from there, Sam has a heart to heart with his sister, and
Right.
then it segues into
The
a
montage.
training
The
montage. Yes, I knew it. I
montage.
knew you loved it as much as I
Yep.
did.
Yep.
Like, we're both trainers, guys. Like,
Yeah.
I get very riled up when I see like a really good, juicy training montage.
Mm-hmm.
And as I'm watching the montage, I just kept thinking in my head, like, I am one with the shield, and the shield, and like the shield is with me. Like,
Right.
because he's just trying to get that synergy with like the shield, and he's
Mm-hmm.
running and all this stuff. And it's just like, it's a cool scene. I love training montages. I love this.
I think I wanted to before we move on to episode 6. I kind of wanted to touch on something that Bucky said. Like I didn't write it down verbatim, but in my notes I mentioned that like say in the heart to heart that he's having with Sam, he's talking about how like his connection was to the Shield was like his last connection to
Yes.
Steve, and basically saying he doesn't have anybody. I felt like Sam dropped the ball because he didn't say, "Well, you got me, man." Like I was actually kind of just sitting there. Even the first and second time that I watched this, I was just like, "Can you tell
Hug
him
him.
right? Can you love him, man? Like in the most like brotherly type of situation, can you just show the man some love? Be like, hey, man, you got me, I got you."
Give us the bromance. Give us
Right,
the bromance.
right.
I feel the same. But something, I feel like a lot was said without needing to be said. And I think something that I like that Sam said, like in that same conversation, is he's like, stop depending on people to tell you who you are or to validate like who you are now, like post the Winter Soldier. And
Right.
I think Bucky needed to hear that. Like he no longer had Steve to kind of be that person to hype him up and be like, that was not you, like
Mm-hmm.
you're more than that, etc. And I think it puts him in a place that by the end of the series, he's the healing process of things like that is never ending,
Yeah.
but he's in a place to make the next step from there. Like he, we're getting ahead, but he, delivers the book to Doc as like a close to say, like, like I'm, like I've made my amends and now I can figure out what the next step of my life is.
Yeah.
So I like it. I like it. There was a lot that was not said, but I agree. Just give us the bromance.
Yeah.
We want to see it.
So training montage, and then we open the suitcase, knowing what's inside, but not shown at the end of the episode. So episode 6. Enter Captain America. I'm not gonna call him Black Captain America or New Captain America. I'm just gonna call him Captain America.
I love like all the commentary of like someone was like, "That's Black Falcon," and
Right,
someone was like,
right.
"No, that's
Mm-hmm.
Captain America."
Yeah.
Like I love it. And then at the very end, Isaiah is like, "You're still black." Like it's
Right.
just like it's so funny. It's just funny. I like the back and forth of it, but it's thinking back to the first time watching this, like it was really cool to see him appear in something that's very resembles very much how we see him in the comics when
Mm-hmm.
he takes on the mantle of Captain
Mm-hmm.
America. It was good.
Yeah.
It was good.
Oh,
Like that
definitely.
previous that yeah, it was great.
And say we don't get like a full view. Like I think we see him in the sky, and Carly looks up and see him. It wasn't until I feel like maybe he enters the building to do the rescue, but ends up fighting Georges, to where we get a full view of the whole costume. Am I right?
Yeah, they teased us for like a good 7 minutes before he fully appeared. Like
Right.
we hear him around, and then like we get the notice that he's close by because Carly is like, he's here. Like let's go.
Yeah.
Trying to get the GRC like members to head out and everything. And so they teased us. They
Right.
made us wait for sure, but it was a good entry, and I have no nothing I want to change from that. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we get Sam in the building fighting the French guy. Carly calls Bucky And is this more? Oh, it is. It's more so a distraction because he's supposed to be
Hmm.
rescuing the people from getting on the truck.
Yes. Yeah.
And at this point, he is more so distracted and talking to Carly on the phone. So, um, what happened from there? I'm trying to remember. You just watched it, so kind of fill in for me.
Yeah. So as we're having that conversation with like Carly and Bucky, and we kind of see Sharon as well, we have little
True.
flashes returning back to like the fight that Sam is having with like our French dude.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a particular scene that I wanted to highlight because I thought it was super
Right.
cool. We see, because some of the hostages were taken like via like the helicopter, and so Sam throws the shield and then flies out and then picks up the shield
Right.
midair. It was so good. That was just delicious.
Right.
Um, but something part of the conversation that Carly and Bucky were having, like Carly kind of calls him out, like in saying, unjustly, by the way, like, oh, when have you ever fought for anything bigger than yourself? Like, can you ever say that?
Mm-hmm.
And Bucky, like, we know, like, World War II, like, in like fighting in
You said it
the
happened
Civil
twice,
War,
right?
so,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Infinity War, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, and I failed. So, like, I think if anything, those are the two definitive ones, right?
Yeah.
Like fighting in World War II and then becoming the Winter Soldier. And then losing in Infinity War, which resulted in like the snap and half people going disappearing.
Right.
But I'm happy it highlighted it. And something that I think it also made me wonder is like, we talked about it in the last episode, about, or we assumed people were aware of Bucky in terms of what he did, him in more of a, even more so we were like, oh, why didn't they ask about Bucky in that interview that John was having with when he was initially introduced as Captain America?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm based on what like Carly said, that that's not known. And so although he's been pardoned, I don't think it's necessarily like general information of who Bucky is. So I'm excited to see if we do get a season 2, if that's going to be something a little bit more like, I don't know, like showcase. Like obviously like our new Captain America gets a lot of like love from the people. They see him, doing his hero thing, and everyone's cheering for him. Like, I wonder if Bucky's gonna get a little spotlight there. It made me kind of think
Well,
back to that. So I was just a little curious.
from here on out, the Winter Soldier is on the same boat as the Ronin. Okay, like say they did what they did, but that past is buried and gone. Those characters are quote unquote dead. So yes,
Mm-hmm.
we know that, or the government knows who the Winter Soldier is. It may not be known to the public, but um, we do know that, I would say, based off of the events of what's happened in the MCU, that Bucky Barnes is an Avenger. They may not, the public may not know him to be, of course, the Winter Soldier, but they know that he's one of the Avengers, because of
Mm-hmm.
his highlighted metal arm, So,
Yeah.
um, who knows? As far as to answer your question, where Bucky will land and everybody knowing him, but the idea of the Winter Soldier being known throughout the world, I think that may be over with, just like the Ronin.
That's perfect. I need no other explanation for that. That was well said.
Yeah.
I like it.
Okay.
Um,
So one scene I did want to kind of highlight, after he throws the shield out the window and catches it midair. I don't. I just loved how he saved whoever he saved on that bridge,
mhm.
and covered him up with the vibranium wings. He had like a
Yeah.
vibranium wings shield along with the shield, and it was, he was being hit by a helicopter, right?
Yeah.
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 So right there again, Wakanda,
We got a
Wakanda,
lot
Wakanda
of
medal
juicy
last. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to
we got
Wakanda.
a lot of juicy like what's the word? Like poster moments with like Sam. We
Right.
get a lot of them, which I guess is the point, right? Because we're not just seeing him for the first time as Captain America, but the world is being introduced to him. Not on a stage in an interview. Not that's not the purpose of it, but
Right.
as a symbol and just doing what's right. No, like definitely highlighted that
Yeah,
scene.
yeah, yeah.
And then he spreads the wings up and then he flies and everyone's like with their phones just like super excited, you
I
know?
was super excited. Like I think the first time that I watched it, I think I eventually had to like go back and be like, "Yo, did you see that?" Like I was just watching on the couch next to my girl and just like, "Hey, you mind if I just rewind it
Rewind,
just a
relive.
little
Yeah.
bit, just real quick, just because that in itself, I was like, that was just badass. It's not only he not only has the shield from Wakanda, but his whole suit is vibranium. So I can only expect good things going forward with that.
And I love that Bucky got that for him because it's like in that last scene we get with like him and the Dora Milaje, like he's
Mm-hmm.
like, "Oh, I need to ask a favor," and then obviously he gives this to Sam down the road.
Mm-hmm.
But I love that he just believes in him so much to take on that
Yeah.
mantle, and it means a lot from him
Yeah.
coming from
Oh,
him
definitely.
because it's not just because Cap wanted that, but I think he sees that for himself too.
Mm-hmm.
And here's we kind of shift into obviously we have the hostages, like the GRC council. People are being kind of taken in
Mm-hmm.
like vans, taken in the helicopter, and Bucky is doing the hero thing. He's trying to take down Carly and the Flag Smashers. Carly's like, we need to distract him, so she sets one of like the trucks on fire.
Yeah.
And along this route is where we have John Walker enter with his makeshift shield,
Right. Mm-hmm.
still very much trying to be Captain America
Mm-hmm.
still, and I say that very specifically because just a few moments later, we see a scene in which he drops the shield or the shield drops, right? Like that fake
Mm-hmm.
shield. And I think it's just symbolic of where he is and that like he's no longer going to be trying to fit that, but just be John Walker and ultimately US agent.
Yeah.
Um, but I do like John's redemption story in the end. I like the way that was played out very
Yeah.
much. Um, and I think I had a couple notes on here. No, those are the main ones. Yeah.
Say with cause yes, Bucky and John end up saving the hostages, and also Sam catching the truck to save the hostage, and his suit being as badass as it was. I thought that was cool. But then the French guy sees that Carly's kind of cornered, so he lays out some smoke grenades for them to escape. Now we get the team that we didn't expect of Bucky, Sam, and John Walker. They're actually
Mm-hmm.
working together. It took 6 episodes, but it finally happened to where they work together to face the common enemy. And with what happened in the chase, we see more so Bucky kind of split with John Walker, and
Mm-hmm.
Sam is left to take on whoever he finds because they don't know who they're chasing. They're following footprints that Sam sees with his goggles, with his special
Yeah.
goggles,
And they've split up. Yeah.
Right. So Sam just happens to uh, find Carly in following these footsteps, but after this altercation with Carly and Carly wanting Sam to fight back, this made me love her even more. Like I made a note to say I couldn't help but love Carly by the end of this series cuz no matter what her cause was, she thought she was doing good, and she wanted Sam to believe in her so badly, but at the same time she knew that it couldn't happen because Sam is Sam. He took on the stars and stripes, and like there was nothing left to do but to fight, but Sam wouldn't do it. So I believe Carly, as quote unquote bad as she was, I think you mentioned it earlier as far as calling her a complex character, to the point to where for me I ended up loving her more at the end.
Yes, and I think like with Sam's perspective, like even at this point, she's because he enters and kind of goes in the middle of after Sharon shoots down the French dude,
Yeah.
correct, and Carly shoots Sharon, and so he's still even then trying to reason with her, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because Sam sees the person that started this journey to begin with,
Mm-hmm.
right? Beyond what the effects of the serum were. And so he still is hopeful in bringing her back. But I think it may have been early in this episode or towards the end of the previous one where Zemo says, like, Carly has been kind of pushed
Beyond measure.
down
Yeah.
beyond measure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so it obviously highlights Sam being the person that he is, but also it is sad. Like my heart broke a little when she's just like, you did it. Like she's very disappointed in Sam for taking the mantle, and he knows that by taking the mantle, the Stars and Stripes, like a lot of people are going to be upset, but he takes it
Correct.
anyway.
Mm-hmm.
No, but absolutely, there's a lot of empathy I have for Carly just because her cause, like as we kind of segue into, like, Sam believes in the cause. Like, he sees why people have followed her. He sees why she's fighting. And just because he saved the members of the GRC, just because, he's, Carly's now dead, he doesn't see the cause as over. He's like, you guys need to think of why. Like, why did people follow her? Why did she try so hard to stop you guys? Like, you need to reflect on the choices you have in front of you. So
Yeah.
it comes to a close very well.
Yeah.
But I know you wanted to kind of talk about the interaction between Sharon, our French boy, and Carly.
Yeah.
So let's revisit that a little bit before we kind of wrap
Oh
up
yeah.
to the end of the episode and the end of the series.
So Carly sees her. All she says is, "I'm disappointed in you," and mentions the name the power broker, and then the French guy was just like, "Oh, you're the power broker." There was literally no confirmation. A lot of people at the end of this, initially when this came out, it's like, "Oh, she's the power broker." And I think it was easier to kind of digest that she was after first watching, but rewatching it again, and even from the beginning of the series, it just makes sense that she works either with or for the power broker, if that makes sense.
And I feel like it could still be the case that she is the power broker. They leave it off for, I mean, obviously she doesn't confirm, she doesn't say it. Everyone else kind of points the fingers, but we do establish that she obviously knew Carly before
Mm-hmm.
Sam kind of got involved and brought her into everything.
Mm-hmm.
She says, like, I'm disappointed in you. Like, when you came to Madripoor, like, I gave you opportunity and you betrayed me. And so we know that she's doing more like bad things behind the scene than we're aware of.
Mm-hmm.
And they're pointing at her to say that she's a power broker, but there is still room to say that maybe this is a misdirection from Marvel. It's not the first time they've done things like this, right? I like I said, I really want to explore this with her because I feel like, being that she was a very good character when she was introduced to us, right? She was working for Shield,
Mm-hmm.
then she worked for, like, the CIA, all of that. She helped Steve. Like, I just want to see her go down that path. And kind of going back to a conversation we had on our previous episode, like, I want to know if what happens if and when she finds out where Steve is and why he's not there. I want to see it. I feel like there's so much drama to untap there. Like, I want to explore it, but there is absolutely room for it to be that it's someone else, right? There's no confirmation from her part. So it's
Her and Steve,
I'm 50
her and
50.
Steve are not a thing. Just because at the end of the day, they were not blipped. So if Steve wanted her, he would have found her. You know what I'm saying, and vice
Dude,
versa.
she must be bitter at to some degree because Steve rescued everyone else. And then, like, if he wanted to save Sharon, he could have. Like, this is Steve.
Sh-
He had
mm,
Nat alongside
but
him. Like,
she
I'm
was
just
not. She
saying,
wasn't on the raft. We don't know her to be arrested. We just knew her to be an
she was
enemy of
on
the
the
state.
run.
Yeah, yeah.
She
She
was
was on the run.
much like he was. Yeah.
So we don't
And
know.
so we know she was on the run. It would make sense for Steve to know that she was on the run.
Mm.
I don't think that's information that he didn't have. Like, our boy abandoned her. Like, I would be bitter even if I didn't know
Man,
that he left me for my aunt.
salt,
Like,
salt.
I just want to see it. In the comics, like, we do see, like, see, Sharon kind of gets, like, the short end of the stick. Like, I think she gets pregnant, but then she gets killed, like, before she has, like, Steve's baby and everything. So she just you know she doesn't get to shine. So maybe let's let her shine as the power broker, you know. But there's drama. I just want to see it. I want to see it.
Yeah, well,
I want to see
Steve's
her get
gone.
mad.
Steve's
I
out
want
of
to see her
here.
call Peggy a whore. Like I want her to be mad.
And who's to say? Let's say it was Aunt Peggy. Who was her uncle? How do we know that Sharon may know that Steve is her uncle? You know, there is a chance that she knows of this Steve that went back in time to bring back the Stones and end up living and marrying Agent Carter. Now, uh, I have a homework assignment for you. Okay.
Do tell.
Just because I'm going to do it myself, but in Captain America Winter Soldier, Steve is talking to old Peggy Carter.
Mm-hmm.
And in this conversation, Peggy is talking to him as if she feels like she's talking to the Steve that she knows, and then realizes that it's not the same Steve. If you kind of get what I'm saying.
I know the scene that you're talking about, and I think, and I understand what you're trying to pull from it. I think and it's still a perspective that you might be able to take, but I think it's because she had Alzheimer's
Mm-hmm.
and, you know,
Quote
the
unquote.
memory, it's like, it's like she's talking to Steve, and then at some point, it's almost like she resets, and it's like the first moment she sees him again, like you know what I mean, which
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to take away from how beautiful that scene was, because it's such hashtag heartstrings to see, you know, because we kind of fall into that conversation in the middle where she's talking to Steve, evidently like she knows he's back, all those things, and they're
Mm-hmm.
just kind of reflecting on things. And then in the middle of the conversation you see like that flip, and then it's just so heartbreaking to see not only her react to seeing Steve after so many years, right, in her perspective
Mm-hmm.
because of the, Alzheimer's, which I'm just going to fall into that
Mm-hmm.
line, but also Steve having to, who knows how many times this has happened, right? That little reset moment,
Mm-hmm.
for him to, see her break down. And when he says, like, oh, what does he say? Something about like, my best girl. Oh, the scene! But I'll definitely watch it again and kind of take it from your perspective of like, oh, you know what I mean? Like, because I do see what you're trying to
Like
say.
it makes sense to me because no matter what, this future Steve is present in this universe because he's lived throughout the all of the events of Captain America. Who's to say that this older Steve was blipped and then eventually came back to give Sam the shield, you know? So at the end of the
so
day, this old Steve, geriatric Steve, that's what I'm going to call him. He's been there throughout the entire MCU without anybody knowing, and he knew of his whereabouts being that he's lived this already. So, of course, we're not going to see this old man in Winter Soldier and any other instance until Endgame, you know? I know I'm kind of going
and
on a tangent here, but.
No, that's okay. That's okay. And it really depends on what line and what thread you're following, because I know I don't know if it's like the producer, the director, or somebody, or the writers, but the Russo brothers have one statement, Kevin Feige has another, which I am fine. Like there was a disagreement even within the creators of these storylines as to how you will perceive Steve, like old man Steve
Mm-hmm.
coming back at the end of Endgame. Like some would say, and that was definitely a theory, kind of like what you're saying, like, oh, like does that mean the Steve we've been seeing, or I'm sorry, not that, but like that Steve has existed this entire time,
Mm-hmm.
kind of like he's the man that Peggy married all
Yeah.
along, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And some people are saying like, oh, well, that can't really be the case because that's not how they've established like time traveling to work. It's probably that he somehow found a way to come back to have this moment to give the shield back to, or give the shield to Sam. And so there's no definitive answer. Depending on what producer, writer, whatever you follow, like each of them has their own take, which I kind of like because it means that the fans, like us, can fall on whichever side we just
Well,
prefer.
let's
You
take
know,
it.
like
Let's
so.
take it on the words of like let's put the producers and the studios to the side, right? Let's take it on the words of the Sorcerer Supreme, okay? And by the Sorcerer Supreme, I'm talking about the OG bald woman. Now, when it comes
Mhm.
down to what she said, once you take the stones, and of course the timeline splits, but if you bring the stone back, the timeline goes back to normal. So being that this Captain America returned every single stone to wherever they went, he should have, by that logic, stayed in the whole timeline up until Loki breaks it, you know? So he has been there since the 1950s. He ended up marrying, and let's say, being that he's already lived a lifetime of war and fighting aliens and all that stuff, why not just believe that he just wanted to retire from that and just live a regular life? Because when he came back to talk to Sam, uh, he like, I forgot what the conversation was, but he basically kind of put it to where he's like, he lived a regular life, and then Sam asked him about it, and he's like, nah, I don't think so, you
I
know?
love
So
that. I love how like saucy he is. I mean, and you can follow either thread, right? Like, and on that same note, like in my eyes, I feel like it would mean that there's like a different branch reality of
mm-hmm,
that, you know? And so, but then that also depends on where the hell does Loki fall in all of this because it's not definitive, right? Because his experiences with the TVA are, you know, the time is very different,
mm-hmm,
right, in comparison to what we see the MCU timeline kind of falling out. So it lands to say that either one is okay to fall, you
mm-hmm,
know? And but regardless, I don't want to say that that scene that we're kind of talking about with Peggy and Steve
mm-hmm.
is because she's then, you know, she thought she was talking to her current Steve and then she realized it's the old Steve. Like I feel like I don't know. I
No,
kind of rather
the
receive it the
whole
way it was initially.
point of this conversation was to say that Sharon Carter knew of Steve, but who's to say that just for the sake of secrecy, geriatric Steve went by another name? He could have just lived his life with Peggy Carter and then just become Uncle Tom. Pause. And at the end of the day, Sharon Carter maybe only knew of this uncle that goes by another name, you know? So,
I see that
yeah.
because my debate was going to be like, see if she did know of Steve, that's nasty because that means she knowingly
Right.
started dating her uncle, you
Right.
know. And these are all things that people have kind of debated on the webs. And honestly, whichever trail you want to follow, do it because being that there are like executives or the creators of this world don't even agree,
Mm-hmm.
you have the freedom to kind of fall on whatever makes you happy. So I would like to say it split reality because then on top of it, it's like, does this mean that Steve lived knowing Bucky was somewhere being trapped and did nothing? You
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? So it's just, I will follow my thread. You may follow yours,
Okay.
and we will
Okay.
continue from there.
All right. Well, I think that's everything that I had. I think the last thing I had was just, um, again, we get Sharon talking to whoever on the phone about her having the power or
Mhm.
something, every resource of the U.S. government, you know. So this, with along with the interaction that happened in that tunnel between the French guy and Carly, all of it, it's nothing definitive of her being the broker. It could have been a notion of her calling and talking to the broker as if she works for whoever it is. All in all, it is a question mark, and who knows? She could very well be the power broker, but I think this series just kind of, in rewatching it, it just didn't make it clear as far as if she is or not.
Yeah, and you know something, I do agree with that. My first watching, I definitely was like, oh, okay, so she is the power broker, which is why when we started having that conversation, I was like, wait a minute, was that not definitive?
Mm-hmm.
And as I rewatch, I do see the gaps where the MCU could do what it's done before, which is, you know, maybe this was just like a
Mm-hmm.
misdirection and something bigger is around the corner. Like,
Yeah.
maybe Shang-Chi's sister is actually the power broker, or,
We gotta find out her name. We
like a
keep
whole
calling her
bunch of
Shang-Chi's
different things.
sister. We gotta definitely
Hold
find out her
on.
name.
I feel like I have it. Guys, I know I have it here. Let's amend this.
Yeah.
Hold on.
IMDb. I'm going right now.
Oh no,
Shang-Chi.
I'm just going on
Oh,
my Shang-Chi notes.
gotcha.
How Jiley.
Okay. Let's call it Jia Lee.
Jiley.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
There we go. So I love that for the to be the case. Honestly, I think another reason I really want Sharon to be the power broker is because I'd love to see an interaction between Sharon and Jiley
Mm-hmm.
as two just like very powerful women who are kind of like I don't know. I don't know if I'd like to say like on the side of bad, but definitely both of those were left in the corner of like they're probably not as good as we would have hoped them to be initially, you know?
Yeah.
So and I think this series kind of closes off really well. We see Bucky really make amends. He finally comes clean to Yori
Mm-hmm.
about, his involvement with his son's death.
Mm-hmm.
And we see Sam have that moment with Isaiah, and then of course we end with like also Val and John having that moment where he's, in a very comic book accurate
Like the
U.S.
black suit.
agent
Yeah, yeah,
outfit.
yeah.
Yes,
Gotcha.
the black suit. There we go.
I think I wanted to
Um,
point out. I'm sorry, I got to take it back to Sharon Carter, but like when she mentioned that she said the super soldier program is kind of now off, but now we have the resources for advanced tech. That that is what led me to believe that if anything, we won't see her in, let's say, season two, if there is a season two of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. But I believe she will be involved in Armor Wars, you know? And I don't know if that's going to be a movie or a series, but being that she mentioned something about advanced tech, I feel like she's going to have something to do with Armor Wars.
I can see that. I can definitely see that. And just on like, the thoughts of a season two, I don't believe there's like a clear indication that they're actually going to make a season two. I think based on like the success of this first season, I want to say strongly that there is going to
You
be a
hope.
season two.
You
Like they
hope.
left way too much. I want to see Joaquin Torres as the Falcon. Like I want to see these
Oh, that's
stories
gonna happen.
continued, you
Definitely.
know?
Oh, definitely.
So
I'm
that's what I'm
yeah,
saying. They
yeah.
left, I think they have intentions, if it's not to continue his story in like a season two, I know we're gonna see him down the
Yeah.
road, but it just would make sense for it to be in a season two.
Yeah.
So there's no clear statements on that just yet. And so I hope we get that soon
Yeah.
because but I'm not worried.
Yeah.
It's gonna happen.
All right.
It's gonna happen.
Well, that is everything that I got. And was there anything else that you had?
No, I think that's all.
Cool. Well, this
Yeah.
was awesome. We brought it back for you all, being that we didn't get a chance to recap before. We wanted to bring it back now. And next week we're bringing it back to the final episodes of The Peacemaker, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
So we're doing episode 6, 7, and 8
Yeah.
because I think it's total of 8. But we're doing those last 3 episodes of Peacemaker. I'm excited, and
Yeah.
then
I haven't watched this
yeah.
week's episode, but last week's was low key kind of
Ugh,
crazy. So we'll chat about that next week, y'all.
talk about gore.
Right,
We'll get into
right.
that.
Yeah, definitely. So you all have a great weekend. Grace, you have a great weekend, and we will see you all next week.
See you
All
guys.
right, later.